Welcome to the House Music Connection podcast. My name is Tony Fuel. I am your host. Each week we have conversations with a different artist where we talk about the industry, personal stories, challenges, success, so that ultimately we can all feel more connected as a house music community and learn from one another. In this episode, we're talking with Steve Mort, aka Chico Flash. And Steve is a garage house artist currently based in Orlando, Florida, but he spent his early life in the United Kingdom, and that's where his love for house music and garage house took root. I invited Steve on the podcast so that we could discuss his radio show, his label, and his overall perspective on garage house and the state of garage house over the last 30 years or so. So let's dive in. Steve, welcome to the podcast, and thanks for joining me.
Thanks so much for having me.
Steve, aka Chico Flash.
Really appreciate it, Tony.
So for listeners who may not be familiar with you, or even those who are familiar with your music but don't really know a whole lot about you, how would you describe yourself? Just the brief history or the brief rundown in 60 seconds.
Well, I guess I've been making garage music for about 6 years or so at this point. I've been playing it for quite a long time. I started listening to it in sort of the late 80s, I guess, listening to house music in the late 80s. And then in the early 90s, I guess, when I went to college was when I got my first radio gig, and then subsequently nightclub gigs. And that was a pretty good time to be doing that. I think that was a fairly fortuitous time to be into garage and house music. And, and at that time where I was in the UK, it was, there were a lot of influences coming from stateside, and that was kind of like influencing a lot of the electronic music that we were listening to at that time. And that's kind of where I got my love of the genre. And now I sort of attempt to make it myself with varying degrees of success. But that's sort of my background, I would guess.
Okay, cool. All right. So you mentioned production, and you mentioned you've been DJing for a while. You're from London, is that right?
Yeah, I spent sort of many of my musical years there, and I spent my time from sort of about 1995 till about the year 2000 when I moved to the United States in London, and that was the time after college, and that was the time where really that scene had taken off, in my estimation, in that city. And I don't think it's that they are years that'll probably be replicated again. There is an attempt to do so, but it was a terrific time, and I still think to this day that London is the sort of the center, the spiritual home, if you like, of garage music, of a particular genre. A sort of a slightly speeded up, frenetic version of the material that we kind of got from New York and Chicago in the sort of in the late 80s and early 90s. But I would say the sort of UK garage and stuff, that was a very specific London sound. And I was very lucky to sort of be there, to come back after college and to be in that town and experience what was sort of the incarnation, and the sort of the peak of popularity in that genre of music.
Yeah. So were you going to clubs regularly that where the promoters were featuring garage music, or I'll say garage,
Garage, yeah.
garage, regularly. Yeah. So tell listeners about the scene, specifically about the nightclubs and the different DJs that were playing around the times that you were, I don't know, the heyday of your times there.
Well, it's interesting. The garage garage, however you want to say it, debate is always alive and well. I kind of split the difference,
Mhm.
and I generally tend to refer to the stuff that is made here in the United States,
Mhm.
which is where I am now, as
Mhm.
garage music. Um, I kind of struggle to call music that was made by E Smooth or
Mhm.
somebody like that a garage tune.
Mhm.
It doesn't feel quite right to me, which is where I think actually they those two um, pronunciations of that one word actually do indicate two distinct types of music. I mean, I think if
Mhm.
if you refer to, I mean, it's a silly distinction, but I mean, I think if you refer to garage, um, Tough Jam doesn't spring to mind to me.
Mhm.
Uh,
Yeah.
I think some of the, you think automatically of sort of New York City and the great artists that were sort of pioneering that genre, Frankie Knuckles and David Morales and so forth. When you say garage, then that to me brings about a whole different set of cast of characters and
Mhm.
type of music. So, but I digress.
Mhm.
I think I would use a little bit of both. In terms of what was going on at that time, one of my favorite clubs to go to was a club called Bar Rumba,
Mhm.
which was not one of the, the sort of big, super well known garage clubs of that time. But it was a sort of a little basement joint on Shaftesbury Avenue in London's Theatreland, and it didn't it didn't have a huge amount of pretension to it. And Bar Rumba was the club that had a night called Garage City. Um, Interestingly, I think pronounced garage in that instance,
Mhm.
where the residents were Bobby and Steve, a sort of a pioneer duo of that scene, and a lot of British DJs, but also a lot of American DJs would roll through there. And it was one of the places that really kind of embraced the US garage sound of
Mhm.
the early 1990s. Um, and that was a place that I went, you know, more or less every Saturday night, I would say. And I liked it because they'd let me in with my shitty clothes and
Mhm.
although they did send me away one time to get a better shirt, just sort of like make an effort. But at that time, the sort of UK garage scene at that time was very sort of about glamour and being well
Mhm.
dressed and
Okay.
no sneakers and
Mhm.
no baseball caps and you gotta look the part.
Hmm.
Uh,
That's interesting.
this club was a little less strict with that, which was good for me because I was broke and I didn't have very much for money for good clothes. But that was very much the scene at that time, and one thing that I remember about um, about it was that it was just an amalgam of everybody and
Mhm.
everybody for that. It wasn't a genre of music that was specific to a certain group in society, which I
Mhm.
which I found sort of refreshing. Um,
Mhm.
you know, Britain is for those who don't know is a pretty classist place,
Mhm.
um, and I think I can say that fairly with some degree of confidence.
Mhm.
Um, and the great thing about UK garage at that time, as it became more popular, is that you could be in a nightclub with bankers and lawyers and gangsters and drug
Mhm.
dealers and hookers and models and you know there was everybody was there, and
Mm.
you know, and it didn't really matter who you were or what you did um, for a living. And I think that that was one of the sort of the really attractive parts of it. I mean, I would say, part of it was, when I look back on it, it's not so much that, a lot of those UK garage tunes at that time that were sort of made on, Ataris or whatever, were particularly awesome. I hear some of them now, and they're okay. That they don't sound
Hmm.
that great. It's more about um, recalling a different time, right? It's more a sort of
Mm.
a nostalgia issue. I mean, that's certainly why I play them. I mean, there are some legitimate bangers in there, um, but I like to play that stuff because it reminds me of that specific time, that time
Mm.
and place. And I think if you ask anybody, I mean, if you ask somebody who um, came of age musically in like Seattle, they
Hmm.
would they would they would tell you something very different about the sound and the vibe in that town at that time. I'm sure they would like grunge or whatever was being made. So I mean it's not that it was sort of I think I'm sort of what I like is kind of like a product of that time, and I don't have any sort of I'm not pompous enough to suggest that it's like the best type of music, and it was just unbelievably great, and no one else did it better. But for me, it was a very special time, and
Hmm.
a music that I still listen to this day.
Yeah, it's interesting you mentioned Seattle because that is where I grew up,
Ah,
and I was, let's see, I was never actually really. I personally was never into the grunge scene, but that was a very big thing,
of course,
you
yeah,
in the '90s. But there was definitely, I don't know. I felt like it was a really good time to be alive in Seattle because we were one of the only cities that had like a dance music radio station, and so I could listen to dance music.
I think
That
Seattle still does,
Yeah, it
still
does.
has a
Yeah,
dance
it's a
music radio station.
high
Yeah,
school radio station, but
that's
it's
right.
one of the more influential stations in the country, maybe even the world. I don't know.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's just
It's a
yeah.
public radio
So
station,
it is. Yeah.
and I just this year met the general manager of that station,
Okay.
and we sort of talked about how that it was interesting that because there are so few uh, stations of that type
Hmm.
in the US, even in cities like New York.
Right.
It's very unusual to find anything sort of beyond your pretty milk toast
Right.
musical output on radio stations. So it's interesting that they're doing that there in Seattle.
Hmm. I mean, nowadays, like if I were to tune it would be like it definitely wouldn't be house. It'd be more of like that Kygo trap house. Like whatever's
Yeah.
popular in dance music now. But yeah, they do
Right.
every
Right.
once in a
Right.
while they'll have
Yes.
like a good house record, and I think they have like
Yeah.
a couple of house radio station or mix shows that they do weekly. But yeah, it's
Yeah.
interesting how things
Yeah.
have changed.
Very
Yeah,
difficult to find anything like that here in Florida, which is where I am now.
yeah. I remember Miami used to have like 93 The Beat or something like that for a while
That's right.
in the early 2000s. But yeah,
That's right. It did.
yeah.
Miami, is a city with sort of a pretty rich electronic music history.
Hmm.
Still has the Winter Music Conference, of course, and it has a lot of record stores. It has a lot of people who are into electronic music. It's I would say that you wouldn't have much trouble finding EDM
Yeah.
in Miami,
Mm.
because that's much more the mainstream, you know,
Right, for
electronic
sure.
music people listen to now. But as a whole, not much underground, I wouldn't say, in our type of music.
Right. So when you talk about the London scene at the time when you were coming of age and whatnot and had just graduated college, would you
Mm.
say then that garage and house music was
Mhm.
kind of like the mainstream at that point?
It was becoming so. I don't think it was until, well, let me preface that by saying that it might have been in London.
Mm,
I don't think it was sort of a national phenomenon
mm,
until probably the millennium, and
mm,
maybe afterwards. And then if you ask all of our, us, old people, we'll sort of say, well, that's when it all went downhill,
mm,
but I think, I think in the '90s, in the early '90s, definitely not. That was when it was all sort of being um, pioneered in
mhm,
1994, 1993, 1994 was when sort of people like Grant Nelson were starting to turn out tunes, and Nice and Ripe, and
mm,
uh, record labels like VIP were sort of on the ascendancy. I would say it was a very regional thing. I mean, I may be
mm,
speaking as someone who just spent all their time in London,
mhm,
but it seemed to me like a London thing. It's a London thing, right?
mm,
So
yeah,
in I would say that was the case until, very late '90s, 2000s, when some of those UK garage tunes started to break through,
mm,
and you started to hear artists, the Heartless Crew, and so forth, you know, getting top 40 tunes in the in the Billboard chart kind of thing. But at the time
mm,
that I will probably say that I think it's fair to say I sort of lost interest a little bit
mm,
when that kind of happened, and
mm,
I'd kind of lost interest a little bit when, uh, and a lot of people are going to be very annoyed with me for saying this, but I sort of lost interest a little bit when two step started to take
mm,
over, and I know there are a lot of people now that are bringing that back and making some good two step. I was having a conversation just the other day with Gavin Dister, who is
mm,
a speed garage guy, who has been making garage house of recent years, very successfully, extraordinarily good producer. And he was talking about and shared a tune with me to play on my show. Um, and he was talking about how he really wanted to get into to making two step. In fact, he was specifically
mm,
interested in sort of projects where you take some of those old US garage classics and do two step versions and things. And there have been
mm,
people that have done that sort of stuff miraculously well. My Deep Radio Network colleague, Mike Moraine, it was one of the two step pioneers.
mm,
He did a two step version of Gabriel, which was a
mm.
classic UK garage tune.
It's got all
Um,
like the trumpets and the horns in it, right?
yeah, that's
Yeah.
right. And
Mhm.
I think that his two step remix was better than
Yeah.
than the original. So that's not to say that I don't like two step. It's just it wasn't my first love, especially at that time. I, and when that kind of became a thing, and then grime kind of took over, and I sort of
I looked at I saw I think it was a Mix Mag video on like the
yeah,
history of dubstep, and I think that
yeah.
they were talking about how like two step and speed garage kind of like was a precursor to
Yeah,
the wobbly bass, and that
that's right.
became
Yes,
synonymous with
it
like
most definitely
dubstep. And
was.
so and when I think of dubstep, I just think of like, I don't know, the most aggressive kind of dance music that you can think
Yeah,
of making. And I don't know,
yeah.
the culture that's kind of associated with that is definitely not my vibe. I mean, I'm not going to like
Mhm.
knock somebody else's,
No,
preferences or whatever, but
absolutely
it's
not.
not
I
along
mean,
my vibe. And yeah, so I
I,
wonder if there was any of
yeah,
that aggression there. Like, was it becoming more aggressive? And is
yes,
that what kind of turned you off from it?
yeah, that's right. I
Mm,
think that's right. It was, the scene and the sound, mainly
mm,
the sound.
yeah.
I'm not. Like you say, it's just not wasn't necessarily my jam. I mean, much in that,
Hmm.
much in the same way that from the ashes of jungle and drum and bass came UK garage.
Mm,
From the ashes of UK garage, kind of came two step and grime and dubstep and whatever else. And then I don't even know what those a lot of that stuff sounds like.
hmm.
I and anybody who kind of listens to my show um, will know that I'm sort of will know where I'm coming from in terms of music. I mean, I'll play some vintage two step. There's no doubt about it, and there is
Hmm.
some good two step being made. But back then, it wasn't really yeah, wasn't feeling it. Let's just say,
There you go. Yeah, I get that.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Okay. So let's see. You DJ. You moved to the United States. You said in 2000. Did
yes.
you do any dance music? Were you DJing or making like? Were you going to parties or anything like that in the United States
um,
that were house music oriented
yeah,
right when you moved?
yes. So I did. So I moved. The first place I moved was to Washington D.C.
Mm,
And I'd been going there for a while. I'd had some friends that lived in DC. So I'd been going there since the late 90s. And I moved there in 2000 and for a job.
mm,
And there were a couple of good clubs. There was no garage music that I could find. There was a club called Tracks,
mm,
which is a legendary club in the Anacostia area of Washington D.C. In southeast, and there was a lot of drum and bass.
mm,
It sort of it was sort of a little bit like and a lot of people I knew were into drum and bass. I was surprised because it sort of, in my mind, and maybe it hadn't, had kind of was yesterday's news, and it was very, very popular. And I spent a good amount of time, I would say, at that club. A lot of Saturdays down at
mm,
Tracks. And then there were obviously the I would say in New York City. Um, Again, I'm just gonna piss people off. I would say that the best the best that New York had to offer might have been done by then. I mean, it sort of
mm,
um, there was still great. I think of the New York scene as sort of the Sound Factory Bar and
mhm,
Zanzibar, well, it's New Jersey, but I, and I think it's lost a step now. I did move to New York after Washington, after I was in Washington, and
mm,
there are definitely some good clubs, um, but I would say that the scene in this country um, was not as all encompassing to me as it was there, and I definitely did sort of
Mm,
lose an interest. Part of it was that, you know, I was kind of older and growing up a bit, and I
mm,
didn't really have as much time to, I didn't really have as much time to, or or energy to keep exploring these things, and maybe I'd feel differently about it if I did. Um,
mm.
and I think everybody feels that the time that that they are in their sort of early 20s is probably the best time. I'm sure if you ask somebody who's in their early 20s now, in another, in 30 years time, when was the best time of all time, they would say, well, obviously in the 2020s.
Yeah.
um so I mean, I think that, to a certain degree, I did lose interest for a while, although I always listened. I was always listening to garage music, and it was just how much I engaged with it.
Mm,
Um, what I would say was different.
yeah.
Yeah,
So you said that you've been producing for 6 years. So what, I
yeah,
guess, what motivated you to start producing and releasing tracks?
um, yeah. I mean, I'm just doing the calculation in my head here. What year is this now? This is 2023. So maybe seven. I
Sure.
I think. Well, first thing was that the there's a much more access now to be able to
Mm-hmm.
make music. Um,
For sure.
you don't need a ton of hardware.
Right.
If you have a sort of a slightly smaller place like I do, or a wife that doesn't really want the place full of full of equipment,
Mm-hmm.
it seemed like something that was, uh, the ability to do it was there, whereas the ability to
Mm-hmm.
do it before was not necessarily there. I'm not the most technically minded person. I,
Mm,
I don't really have a huge love of equipment and
mm-hmm.
wires and plugging stuff in and figuring. I know that there are a lot of producers in our genre, Tony, that love the hardware and
Yeah. And that's not
find
me
that.
either. Yeah.
And
Yep.
that's fine. I mean, I got a
Yeah.
keyboard, it's like behind me there. I got a,
Yeah.
but generally, I'm not. That doesn't sort of excite me very much, and the sort of the idea of having to acquire all of that and rig it all up, and that I don't know, just not particularly interested in it. And
Mm-hmm.
but I love the music, and actually, somebody else that I know who produces progressive house, had got himself a copy of Ableton Live,
Mm.
and has sort of been extolling the virtues of it. So, I kind of picked up a copy and started noodling around with it, and making some pretty atrocious beats, and I was like, this is
That's how we
cool.
all
I can
start, right?
spend a bit of time on that, watch a few YouTube videos and stuff, and I guess that's where I picked it up. But it's very, and I'm sure you can attest, it's very sort of addicting, right?
Mm-hmm.
That once you sort of get the hang of it, it's something that's difficult to stop doing. Um, but I, I would say that, I'm not like some producers, that ease of access, right? That ability to where the playing field has been kind of leveled, right? So
Mm-hmm.
anybody can make music these days, or sort of music. Um, I would say um, that there are a lot of people who it means a lot of saturation,
Mm.
and
Yeah.
it means that it's quite easy to make a tune, um, and there's a lot of music around. Um,
Mm-hmm.
I'm I don't think that if you look at my track source page, that's definitely, I'll go for like a year and I'll make one,
Mm,
because I don't really feel the same way that I have to keep making and producing stuff to be noticed. I don't really care about
mm,
whether anybody notices. I
mm,
don't really care really if anyone's buying it. I don't. It's nice. It's nice if people buy it. It's nice if people listen to it. Um, I don't really. It's not that important to me. I barely do social media, right?
mm-hmm,
So so the promoting bit of it is a bit dreary, which is annoying for somebody who's got a record label. Um, so making the music for me is just a kind of a hobby. I do it for fun, and I do it when I need to just kind of relax a little bit. And
mm,
you know, hence there's a lot of stuff left on the on the cutting room floor, as you might say. But
right.
I think I started making it because it was easy to do, and
Mm-hmm,
I didn't feel that there was a lot of the stuff I liked around at that time,
mm,
and now there is.
mm,
But now I'm sort of addicted to it, so I just keep doing it.
yeah.
Yeah, I don't think it's any more complicated than that. I mean, I don't have a sort of a revelatory story that some artists
Yeah.
might say they have. I just sort of make the stuff because I like it, and I
Mm-hmm,
don't make complicated stuff either. It's not supposed to. There are I would say there are far better producers. I just kind of make stuff that is you just designed to have an enormous kick and some some stabs, and I try to
mm-hmm,
think how that's going to go down on a dance floor in the kinds of clubs that I used to listen to. Is it gonna rattle the speakers? Are people going to go nuts? Um, and
mm,
that's what. And those kinds of tunes are um, not that complicated. You just don't overthink them. That's what I find.
yeah.
It's just
I
like
think
don't
that's my
overthink
problem
it.
sometimes.
Yeah,
I don't know. I feel
overthink it.
like as
Yeah, I mean,
yeah.
it's easy to do. It's really easy to do to just kind of overthinking it. But the results are, you know, there are some producers that produce extremely high quality, well produced, and polished tunes, and I think Tony, I would probably put your tunes in that category.
Oh,
I
thank you.
listen when I listen to them. I think they're expertly produced by someone who's sort of spent a lot of time on it. When I listen to mine, that's not the. I mean, maybe I know that that's just not the case. But when I listen to them, I think, well, yeah, there's a guy that slammed down some beats, and made something that he thought people might like. But it's not a, a masterpiece. It ain't.
Yeah. So when you're thinking, so you mentioned like hearing, what you think is expertly produced. So we're gonna kind of change gears then into, I guess, label A&R because you run a label.
Yeah,
I want
I
to ask
do.
a little bit about how that got started, but while it's still top of mind,
Yeah.
can you tell listeners about, like, I don't know, the what's your perspective from the A&R chair,
Mm.
as you run a label and you hear the tracks that are coming in. What a I guess what are you listening for when you decide that you want to sign a record to your label?
Yeah, it's an excellent question. I'm listening for two things. Um, do I like a tune? Um, would I play it? And two, is it going to sell anything? So, I've learned there are certain tunes that do not sell. I just
Mm,
can't sell them, and maybe just because I can't market them. I just don't know how. Um, I anytime I release a bit of two step, I can't. a shift like a couple of copies.
Mm,
And it probably is just me, because I know that there are labels now that specialize in two step, so they must be selling some. Um, so I find that to successfully promote something, I have to like it. I have to
mm,
be, I have to think it's a good tune. Um, Now, you know, I run that label with Liam Avery, who goes by Consinity.
mm, mm,
Um, so he also, I guess, has to like the tune.
sure.
So we sort of just say, hey, what do you think of this tune? Um, in terms of the tracks that we get, um, I hear a lot from the same artists. I get a lot of
Mm,
demos from you know some people who produce a lot, and
mm,
I'll take one or two, and I don't want to saturate my label with names that are out there everywhere all the
mm,
time. I mean, I do want it to be. I do want it to be somewhat surprising sometimes, like who I don't know who that artist is. I wonder who that is. Or that's
mm,
an unusual tune. It's something that I haven't heard a million times before. Um, and that might mean that I don't sell very many copies. Like I said, when I sign something, I think it's going to sell because it's unusual and
mm,
cool or interesting or whatever. It doesn't necessarily mean it happens that way. I'm
yeah,
not, but I don't. I wouldn't say we'll have like a formula. I
right.
mean, I think some labels have been very successful in signing tunes that have a formula, and the audience knows what they're going to get from that label. I think Bob's Your Uncle Records doesn't, maybe to our detriment. But again, not making much money on it. So
Mm,
the point is not to is not to do that. It's to put music out for people who are doing things that are interesting.
cool.
I think.
So I guess that kind of leads into maybe why you started the label.
Yeah.
Sounds like maybe the answer to that is partially because you want to push music out there, or push music that
Yeah.
is interesting and whatnot. So it
That's right.
is that
That's
true?
right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
Okay.
think it's right. Well, so it started out. It was myself, Liam Consinity, and Joe Olindo.
Mm-hmm.
Um, at that time, I guess it was 2018. I guess 2019. And Olindo was making like a ton of great tunes at that time, and putting them out on Plastic and Pogo, and he really, I mean, he was mainly making hip hop music, and then just sort of started making garage for the hell of it, and was extremely good at it, and wanted to start a label. And I guess the reason was that was basically so that we could just release our own music and not have to keep signing it to people. And then you
Mm,
get you get more of the money, right? That was the sort of
mm,
the idea. Um,
sure.
and we found that even when you have your own label, you still hardly make any money. I mean, it's not gonna keep you in wine, in my case. So that was probably the main reason for it. And certainly, it is nice to have that outlet, and
Mm,
it is good. And I'm constantly thinking about what the direction of that label should be.
mm,
Do I make it so that it is a label that primarily releases our own tunes? I mean, and
mm,
and that's pretty popular. I mean, Danny J. Lewis does that with Just Underground.
right.
Ross Couch does that with Body Rhythm. I mean, there's many labels that are essentially just sort of an extension of the artist. And that's tempting because it's not my day job and I don't have
Mm-hmm.
a huge amount of time. And, it can be a time suck. And if I just
Mm-hmm.
used it to put a tune out every 2 weeks and do the promotion and do all of that is it can be it can be a bit of a lift. And there is a temptation to make it sort of an outlet just for our own music. We haven't done that yet, and I'm kind of reluctant to, because I do like exposing really good tunes that are out there and people that are doing interesting stuff, and might not have a chance to be signed somewhere else. So we're sort of avoided doing that thus far, but it's sort of a constant discussion. That's at the end of the day, whatever we do with Bob's Your Uncle Records, um, you know, we're not going to be buying private jets anytime soon because, as you know,
Yeah.
um, there is in digital music these days, there's almost no money,
Mm-hmm.
and I don't shift. I don't have anything like the scale of sort of like Plastic People, you
Mm-hmm.
know, where Mark can afford to do vinyl presses and sell them. We just don't have that sort of scale. Um, so we're in the digital world, and in order to make money in the digital world, you have to really you have to keep churning them out constantly, constantly, constantly. Uh, and I just don't really have the time or inclination for that. So Bob's Your Uncle is going to remain as it is, and I'm going to remain poor.
What has been the what has been the biggest struggle with running a label that you've
So
experienced?
say that one more time.
What is the biggest struggle that you've experienced running a label?
The biggest one, the time. It's just the
Mm,
time. I mean, I think, you know, some people do run their labels for a living. Um,
mm,
I don't, and I, you know, fine, because here's the thing: like when I sign a tune from somebody, so whether it's Tony Fuel or somebody else, um, that artist has decided to release their music that they spend a lot of time working on my label, and that artist could have released it somewhere else. I mean, if it's any good. Um, so I do feel like I should respect that and put some work into it.
mm,
And as somebody who's made tunes themselves, I put some tunes out on labels where that has not been the case, where there just hasn't been any. There's been no promotion. There's no reason to
There's
do it.
like
I could have just stuck
maybe
stuck
one
the
Facebook post and then they're off to the next
yeah.
signing the next record. Maybe.
I
Yeah.
could have just put the thing on Bandcamp, and
Mm-hmm.
so that's that. So I do feel like I should, you know, do some work, and at least produce the content that the artists themselves can use to promote their work, and support it, and get it out to people. If you're not going to do that, I don't really understand the point. So I would say that the challenge is that once I've signed something and I'm going to put it out, it's work. It's work for me to do it. And I have a pretty busy job, in my life.
Mm-hmm.
So doing that is not always easy to do. Um, which is why I have that, as we said before, that constant discussion about what we do with the label, and do we keep doing what we're doing? But I do feel a responsibility for artists that are that sign, and I want to make sure that I pay them. So
Mm.
I want to make sure that I'm keeping an eye on how much money their tunes are making. I want to make sure I promote the tunes. So it's just work. I mean that's the most challenging thing. And the other thing I would say is how to stand out from the noise.
Mm.
Like as we were talking about before, when we were talking about production, there's an awful lot of music out there, and then also I would say the other issue is something I completely forgotten. There was another issue I was going to tell you about, but
Is it?
but
I
I
wonder if it has to do with like the artist management and like responding to people, messages a lot. People
well,
wanting
no,
this
it
instant,
didn't. It didn't have
communication.
to do with that, but that is an
Yeah,
interesting point. Yeah,
yeah.
I to be honest, we're not sort of storied enough to have that many, and I haven't
Mm.
signed any artists that are that demanding.
Okay.
I think just because nobody really that big is coming to me and begging to be a pop your uncle, right? So I think the people who are sort of accustomed to selling masses of tunes are, I mean, they're
Mm.
generally people that I people that are successful, like yourself, or um, true to life, or
Mm.
uh, they're successful and established artists, but they're people I know, um, and they're people I know are they're going to want me to promote their tunes, but they're going to be uh, not a massive pain in the ass, and there are, because we're in a sort of an artistic field here, so
Mm.
with that comes enormous egos, and I know people that have run labels or run labels that deal with phenomenal amount of politics and
Mm.
people who just make it very troublesome to run a label.
Mm.
So I'm cautious of that,
Mm.
and in who I sign. But I think we've played it pretty well so far, and that hasn't been that hasn't, keep my fingers crossed, but it hasn't been a big issue so far.
That's good. So, this is kind of random association here, but I was thinking about when you were talking about moving units and whatnot. And recently, I don't know, within the last 3 or 4 years, Traxsource kind of created its. Maybe it was only 2 or 3 years ago. 2 years ago, I think.
Mhm.
Traxsource created the garage kind of
Yeah.
category, giving it its own page and its own like subgenre chart and whatnot.
Yeah.
Do you feel like that has helped the music, or do you feel like not as many people are hearing it now because they're not, when before it was garage, it would be kind of placed into that soulful house or deep house,
Yeah.
uh,
Yeah.
area, and then but now it's garage, and I don't know. I guess I wonder like if maybe some people are buying it more because it is garage, but then there's a lot of people, but a lot fewer people maybe are hearing it because they're not going to garage and they're expecting to see it,
Mhm.
whereas they would buy it or listen to it if it was on the deep house page.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, it's sort of a double-edged sword, isn't it?
Hmm.
Like you say, I mean, it does make it easier to find for people who want to find it. It does mean that fewer people are likely to stumble upon it in their
Mm.
search for other types of music. Um, in terms of sales and exposure, and I'm not sure that it has made a heck of a lot of difference. I mean, I
Mm.
think on balance, I would say it's been beneficial, in that it has given a little bit of a buzz to that genre. Now, we're just talking about track source, and I
Hmm.
think in Garage House, that is the sort of the primary platform where a lot of DJs in that genre buy from.
Hmm.
But other platforms have had a garage um, genre page for a long time.
Mm.
Beatport or Juno or whatever. Um, and I think that we don't generally tend to release our tunes first on TrackSource, and that's where we get sort of most of our sales.
Mm.
Um, but I haven't noticed an enormous difference. I mean, maybe at the beginning there was some interest in that, and and I think that we did see a kind of a bit of a spike in sales at that time. This might not be the case for all labels, but I found that. But I don't find that anymore. And if, in fact, um, I found that sales have sort of declined
Mm.
over the last year or so.
And it's hard to
Um,
say what kind of I don't
yeah,
know what made that happen, because it
it's
could be
almost
that
impossible
just
to
sales are
know.
overall like declining, or it could be
That's right.
because of the new genre page, or it could be because people are streaming more
Yep.
than they used to, and
It
not buying
it
the
could be
tracks.
any of those
Yeah.
things. It could just be the arc of interest in the genre. I mean, these things sort of there are peaks and valleys always,
Hmm.
and it could just be that we're kind of heading down towards a valley for who knows how long. But
Hmm.
it's hard to see it when you're in it. I mean, maybe we,
Hmm.
in a sort of a couple of years' time, we'll just look back and say, well, that was the point at which you know people kind of stopped um, buying the stuff as much. I mean, I don't know. I mean, it's a little different from the decline of garage music from in the 1990s, early 2000s, because it was on a different scale then. It was mainstream. It's
Hmm.
it's it's not mainstream now. This time in the digital era, we have not been able to push it mainstream particular. I mean, maybe once or twice, but there's not
Hmm.
really been anybody that's making garage house music that has I, I can't think of anyone that's like had a top 40 tune. I don't think there's anybody.
Yeah.
So that is, and I'm fairly confident that that's also the case in the UK. So we're in a completely different world, and streaming. I mean, my the Chico Flash streaming numbers have gone up a bit, but that's just because absolutely nobody was listening to me before. So there's only one way, only one direction to go.
Yeah.
Overall, I think it's hard to say what's caused that decline. The genre page on TrackSource may be one of the factors. I think it was nice to have. I mean, I think that
Mm.
maybe some people got involved in the genre, or heard of it or explored it a bit more because of what they learned about it from that.
Hmm.
I have a feeling it's probably fairly minimal. I don't know. Not
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah. Who knows? I guess the best thing that we can do as artists and as a label is, I would imagine, as this goes for labels too, is just to be release consistent content, or consistent music and whatnot, and build up our profile, and keep um I don't know, just consistently releasing good music and having people buy more into us than the genre that we're releasing, as long as it's like not too far away from the genre
Yeah,
that we're the direction that we were originally heading.
the consistency thing is interesting. It's and I'm bad at it, because and that's very much, I think, a function also of the age, in that, they say to have a successful blog or a successful podcast or whatever it is, you have to do it consistently. You have
Hmm.
to put it out on a regular basis, same time, all the time,
Hmm.
putting it out. And I think that's probably also the same for labels and for artists.
Hmm.
Um, and I sort of, and maybe it's just because I'm like envious that they can do it, but I always kind of look at artists that chuck tunes out all the time and think, what are you doing?
Well, who knows
But
what is happening, like, in their personal life or their job life, if they're, because some
right,
people
that's
may
right,
be,
and
they may be releasing really good records and whatnot, and spending a lot of time like putting good music out, but then they're in and out of
yeah,
relationships, and living with their mom at
yeah.
48 years old and whatnot, and who knows.
But maybe that's what you have to do
Yeah.
to stay relevant and to
Mm.
consistently, and therefore attract a following. But if
Mm.
if you're not putting putting stuff out all the time, you'll very, very quickly sink into the background. And I think that that is that's that I think is just a function of where we are, and the great equalizer that is the internet. And
Hmm.
that's, I would say that, in terms of sort of just staying on the radar of people in the industry, I do find like having a radio show is quite good for that.
Mm.
For anyone that doesn't know, I do a Friday evening show on Deep Radio Network, which is, yeah, and you have a show on there too, Tony, which is Grant Nelson's, baby.
Hmm.
And that station, I've been doing a show on there for 5 years now, I think. And the live audience is small. I mean, it's not like you would get on a radio station, a sort of radio show, traditional radio show. But I do find that doing it every week and keeping myself out there, that the podcast has developed a pretty good, several thousand people a go. Um, and that's because
Mm.
it's one of the only things that I do outside of my regular job, which is absolutely consistent all the time.
Mm.
I don't put out a tune a week, but I do put out a kind of half decent radio show. And I
I'd say
think
it's
that
it's
is
more
what
than
we,
half decent. Yeah.
yeah,
51%. Yeah.
51, 51,
No,
51.2% decent.
it's up there. Yeah.
So that, you that does sort of keep you relevant. I mean, the interesting thing about that show is that it's it achieves for me the complete opposite goal that the record label achieves for me. So the the record label is there so that I can discover new artists and give them exposure, and try to, anyway,
Hmm.
allow them to kind of sell 5 copies or whatever. The radio show is purely indulgent for me. That
Mm.
is just there to allow me to rinse 1990s, early 90s to late
Yeah.
90s garage and house music, and I don't make any apologies for that. And that there are some there are some folks that will sort of say, well, Chico Flash just breaks no boundaries. I own that. I'm not.
Mm.
I don't intend to. I just intend to do what I love doing, and and so. But the point being, I do it consistently,
Hmm.
and that's what gets you an audience, and I think that's what you got to do now.
Yeah, for sure. So 5 years on Deep. That's awesome. I was just actually
It's been a
talking to
while.
John Manley the other day, and we were talking about 9 years. Deep just had its 9 year anniversary, and
Yes.
yeah, I think it's going to go strong
We're
for
trying
another
to
nine
think
years.
of something we
It's a
can
really good
do for
community and a really
10
great
years.
station. It looks nice. It's pretty solid and stable as
Yeah,
far as the
it's the
platform
only
goes. Yeah.
thing. It's one of those things where it's nobody that's on it. We're all kind of um, flying under the radar. We all have things that we do. We all have our day jobs, and we're sort of do
Hmm.
it for a bit of fun. But I believe that it is every bit as good as um, a traditional radio station, and it has a lot of room to grow. We just don't. It's just getting the audience is tough because again,
Hmm.
like music, there are a million digital radio stations out there
Yeah.
of varying degrees of quality, and you know who takes that on. It's sort of saturation again,
Hmm.
but I do think it has a loyal following,
It
fairly
does. Yeah.
substantial one. I think it's a fairly substantial one, and I love doing it, so I'm going to keep doing it.
There you go.
Yeah,
Nice. Okay. Well, let's see. As we land the plane here,
yeah.
are there any upcoming projects that you are excited about in the next couple of months or so that you would like listeners to know about?
Well, the next couple of months, my most exciting project is going on vacation.
Hmm.
But I don't think that's the answer you're looking for. In terms of music, um, I'm working on a couple of things. I have a
Hmm.
hard drive full of tunes that are unfinished. Um, I'm working on a couple of bits and pieces. I'm working on a remix for Jesse Hernandez, goes by 67th and Bird, out of
Hmm.
Miami, and he's kind of a newcomer to the scene. I've liked some of the tunes he's done. I remixed him a couple of times. Put out one or two of his tunes on Bob's.
Hmm.
So I'm working on a tune there. I'm doing a collaboration I'm kind of excited about with Consinity, my
Hmm.
label co-owner. Um, he's he's been working on a track with a vocalist called Vanessa Jackson,
Hmm.
and we've sort of been talking about whether or not to make that a collaboration, and I think we will. Um, and I think I want to see the direction that the label goes in.
Sure.
It's a For me, that's something that we have as kind of a canvas to do as we want with,
Hmm.
and that there are very sort of few things in life where you can just do whatever you want, and I think that one, Bob's Your Uncle. I'm excited to see what we can do with it in 2024, and we may completely f it up, but I think we want to try some stuff.
Hmm.
And and see where that goes. Hoping to play some more gigs if I can. By the time this airs, I'll have already played a gig. I'm playing uh, a garage house party over in the UK,
Oh, nice.
just before Christmas. So it'll be nice to do that, and I haven't played in Britain in 25 years.
Hmm.
So it'll be nice to do that, and hoping to pick up some more work here in that respect. I mean, there is a fairly lively, as I said, drum and bass scene in Florida.
Hmm.
Not much garage house, and I would like to try to change that, as I'm sure you would like to do in Minneapolis, and all of us would like to do wherever we are. It's an uphill struggle, but New
Hmm.
Year's resolution: try to get out there and push that scene a little bit when we have the time. But I'm just looking forward to with music, you never get bored with it, right? So
Yeah.
you
Well,
know, just
I'm
keep
looking
pushing
for all
on.
kinds of reasons to go to Orlando during the winter, especially escape the
Well,
Minnesota winter.
you're a
So
regular down here at
yeah.
our
So
famous attractions.
so yeah, let's
Yeah,
maybe we could collaborate on a on an event, that invite people from from I don't know, the
absolutely.
North American Garage Festival. Who knows?
That's
Have
well,
all the
in Orlando here, we have the Electric Daisy Carnival,
yeah.
which is a very big, which just wrapped up recently, which is a very big
Hmm.
EDM festival.
Hmm.
So I think we're owed at least a festival with some decent music, right?
Yeah. At least a place to hang out and
Hey, listen, I will
for
say for
yeah.
EDM, right? Okay, so I say for EDM, not my cup of tea. I can't make it
Hmm.
though. I don't have
Yeah.
not even the first idea how to do it. It's not. We're very we scoff at EDM and we make fun of it, but an awful lot of people like it, and
It's true.
it's there are a lot of producers that are extremely good at making it, and you know and they have
Yeah.
achieved what we would love to achieve,
That's
right?
true.
So so I
Well,
think
and for some
there's
people, EDM might be the entry point to that. The more
that's right.
quote unquote proper stuff that we like. So who
That's
knows?
right.
Yeah,
That's right.
yeah,
So I think we should probably spend a little less time ribbing EDM producers and fans, and sort of
for sure.
uh, trying to figure out how they've managed to achieve what they've achieved.
Yeah,
Don't know. So.
I don't know. Maybe the mafia is involved somehow. Who knows?
Well, that could be. Although I, I would say as somebody who was around in the UK garage days of the '90s, there were plenty of gangsters involved in that.
Yeah,
Maybe that's why it became
maybe
popular.
that's the trick.
Maybe that's just what we need. We need to sign up a few. Yeah, we need to sign up a
Yeah.
few gangsters. Let's do it.
Okay,
New Year's resolution 2024.
that's
More
right.
crime.
More, yeah, more crime and yeah, even more drugs on the scene.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I can't even. I'm ruined the next day after two glasses of wine. So
that's
those
yeah.
days are pretty much past, pretty much gone for me, I would say.
I can't even imagine because I stopped drinking a while back, several years ago. It was 15 years ago at least, and the way that I feel on Mondays now, like after like being carting the kids around all weekend and like doing activities with the family, and then just kind of feeling spent on Mondays after the weekend sometimes,
That's right.
not even in having any drink or other kinds of
No,
intake, and
just
now I just
exhausted.
can only imagine what my body would do if I was still
Yeah,
partaking.
that's
Yeah,
pretty much getting towards your 50s. Yeah, that's
yeah.
what it's like. Yeah,
Yeah. Okay. Well, this has been a really good conversation. Thanks again for joining me. And then
of course.
I'll be sure to link or include your links in the show notes in the description, so that people will
I'd
know
appreciate that.
how to find you or
Okay.
where to go. If they
And
yeah, if they want to
the audience can
find out more.
find out more about this fascinating person.
Let
All
me
right,
just
I
yeah.
really appreciate you having me, and I think it's important that you're doing this podcast, and it'll
Well, thank
certainly
you.
I think over time will help, you know, raise the profile of what we're trying to do, and I really appreciate you having me on.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thanks for joining me again, and let's talk to you soon. Take care.
Thanks, Tony. Appreciate it.